Right, guys. So, as we said, we're going to do a little weekly episode of like questions from the comments and go through a few things. And I'll try and pick out sort of the questions that I think will be most beneficial, not the most repetitive. I don't want to be answering the same questions week in, week out, and I wouldn't want you to have to endure that either. So, I've sort of picked out some of the questions that I think will be quite interesting for everyone. Um, anyway, I've got five. We've got five questions to get through, and I know I waffle a little bit, so bear with me. I'll try and get through them quite fast. I've printed them off as well. I'm like a little flipping news reporter sat here with me. Right, on today's episode. Anyway, first question. Barry Neville, bloke from down Cornwall, I think he said. And basically, I'll just cut straight to the question part. I live in a 200-year-old house, and the outside walls are stone, slate, and muck, and the interior are lath and plaster. So, if they're not perfect, I wouldn't mind. Some of the walls have been artexed. I think they all need plastering. Would I still use multi-finish, or do I need to do something else? The thing I worry about is everyone tells me that the stone walls need to be able to breathe. So, Barry, what everyone's telling you, I think, is absolutely spot on. Now, I'm not saying we can't make it work with our modern products that we've got. We can sort of put membranes on, chemical damp-proof courses, all sorts of weird and wonderful ways of doing it. If you phone any rep from any company, they're going to tell you their specification on how they'll sort of guarantee the work that you do, as long as you do it to their sort of spec. So, yes, you could get around it using modern systems, but personally, mate, I think if you're living in a type of house like that, if you're in a 200-year-old house, you've sort of picked that because you love that type of house, Otherwise, you would have bought something, a bit more newer. So, me personally, I wouldn't go down the route. I would sort of even go as far as saying you'd be ruining the house if you started putting a modern plastering system in there. Not only that, here's the funny thing, if you're a beginner, see, I would use the original product, so that's the quick answer. I would go back to using lime plaster. But to add to that, lime plaster is actually easier to use if you're a beginner. I mean, it doesn't set. It slowly goes off with the air, the carbonation, I think it's called, in the air. It's not like when you mix multi-finish or board finish and it sets, you've got like 2 hours to do what you need to do and it's gone off. So for the beginner, I would say lime plastering is even better. Not only, I don't want to go into another subject here, but get this, lime is the best product for plastering. I mean, it repairs itself. It doesn't, if you get a crack in it, you can sort of wet it and it repairs itself. It's flexible. It doesn't really break down. It doesn't get mold growing on it. It doesn't get damp. It's breathable. It flipping lasts forever. I mean, do you know the term planned obsolescence? When things are sort of designed to break down over time, so you have to buy more. Like, I'm not sort of saying there's a big sort of conspiracy in the building game, but why we don't use lime nowadays, I don't know. Because, in my opinion, it's better. It's anyway. So, what I've done, Barry, I have replied to your comments anyway. But there's a little. I'm going to put a little link here. You can click on this. If you want to use lime for any of your plastering projects, if you're doing a building, anybody that's watching this, if you're doing a building and it's all lime plastered inside, if it's a couple of 100 years old, then it definitely will be lime plaster. I personally think you should use the same plastering system that the house was designed around. If you haven't got a damp proof course and there's no cavity, then ideally you want to use lime plaster if you can, but you've got to use a breathable paint as well. You can't just go and buy your B&Q flipping matte emulsion and paint that on. It won't work. You need to use, that's why they used to use lime wash paints. Now, that company that I put the link in for, they do all the paints, they do all the lime, and if you phone them up, I've got I can't pronounce it because I can't speak Welsh, but they're not far from me anyway. Ty Mar Line. It's Nigel and Joyce. I've phoned them in the past. It's a family-run business. Lovely people, tell them what you're doing, tell them what your plans are, and they'll tell you the best products that they sell for what you're doing. And you'll have a wonderful time doing it because, like I say, it doesn't set. It takes ages to go off. It's lovely to work with. It's fluffy. Lime is just a fantastic product. In fact, the only reason lime sort of started setting faster was because plasterers used to gauge it with plaster of Paris, and then it'd be called gauged setting stuff. So you'd imagine that's where the term "I'm having a gauge" comes from, because they used to gauge it with setting stuff, which was plaster of Paris. So you gauge the mix, and then you could do it a lot faster then. So you could have maybe 2 gauges of this stuff in a day. Anyway, so now you probably understand where the term I'm going to do a gauge of plastering. Some plasterers call it I'm going to do a hit, second hit. Some plasterers say I'm going to have a gauge. So that's where that comes from. Anyway, yeah. So that's the end of that one. I won't keep waffling on about it. Use the lime. It's fantastic stuff. Next question was from Edward Duffy. He said he's trying to learn. So we're talking about skimming over an artex ceiling now. And it's the video where I used the speed skim, to flatten it in with him. After each sort of coat, I flattened it off with the speed skim. So Edwards said, I'm trying to learn. Kirk, would that be a total of going over it 8 times? And would you not use blue grit or PVA? Yeah, seal the ceiling. Whenever you go over artex, always seal it first. You can use PVA, blue grit. You can use SBR. There's loads of different sealers. We know all about that. But the total of 8 times going over it. So yeah, that's your first coat, flatten in, your second coat, flatten in, and then I flatten with my trowel, and then I give it 2 more trowels and a polish. So yeah, in total, you're going over the ceiling 8 times. Now, is it necessary to go over a surface 8 times? You will find plasterers on building sites that can give it 1 coat, trowel it twice, and give it a quick polish, and it's done. It's possible, so that's only, what's that, 5 times or something. I'm not going to count it again. All I'd say is when you're beginning, I wouldn't even count how many times you go over it. Now, get it on and get it flat. Give it another coat and get it flat. Don't mess around with it if it's soaking wet. But then, I would say flatten it in and give it 3 trowels. But if you're not happy with it after the 3rd trowel, give it another one, Or if it was too wet because you haven't got your timings right, you're not going to do any harm going over it more and more. There's only going to be a certain point before it's set. So if you need to go over it 10 times, it doesn't really matter. You eventually, as you get better at plastering, you want to become more efficient. You want to be doing the least amount of work possible to get the best results. So, if you can get the best results giving it 1 coat and 2 trowels and a polish, because you're only going over plasterboard and you know your timings and you can get it spot on and you can get away with that, then that's fine. I personally have never really liked 1 coat, and I've always liked to give it 2 coats. 2 coats, flatten it in, 2 trowels and a polish. That's my sort of, I know by the time I've done that, the job's perfect. But if you need to go over an extra time or an extra 2 times and you want to flatten it between trowels when you're getting started, then do that, whatever it sort of takes to get the right job. Next question from Calvin Jones. It's been a nice quick one, this. We're talking about plastering ceilings. Now, in a lot of my videos, I've plastered the walls first, and then when you sort of see me do the ceiling, the walls have been done. So Calvin said, great professional, however, how come ceiling last? Now, there's no rule for this for me, Calvin. I haven't specifically chose to do the ceiling last. I just sort of pick what's going to be easiest for me to do in the day, what I feel like doing when I get there in the morning. Now, when I was taught to plaster, my old man always told me, ceilings first, walls afterwards. You always do the ceiling first. Now, when you actually get down to the nitty gritty and look into why you do the ceiling first, because it doesn't really make that great deal of a difference, is because usually when you plaster the ceiling, you're flipping drop loads of stuff all down the walls, because you're upside down plastering, you're dropping stuff everywhere. I've been doing this for quite a while, and the little technique that I use where I start about an inch away from the wall, I draw it out and I go back in and I take a little bit and go in neat. With doing that and the sort of the amount that I've done it without dropping plaster, I don't really drop anything down the walls. I'm not going to say I don't. Don't all start looking at me video. I dropped a bit. You will see me drop a little bit from time to time. Just wipe it off. So I ceilings or walls first. It doesn't matter to me because I'm not that messy, and that's the only reason, because I just don't drop it. So if you're quite neat, then there's There's no harm in you doing the ceiling last. I mean, what happens when you turn up to just skim someone's living room ceiling? That's all they want doing. I mean, the walls are finished and you're doing the ceiling, last. So it doesn't really matter as long as you're not messy. Let's turn my little heater off. I was getting carried away there. Just going through questions and flipping. There's a little heater under my desk here. I'm like cooking. I'm flipping head's going redder and redder. I'm about to explode. Ashley Horgan. I'm sorry if I've got this wrong. Ashley Horan. Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, we're talking about going over different backgrounds, distemper and stuff, lime wash paint. I think Alex Morley said it's plasterer's kryptonite distemper. It's basically the chalky, dusty stuff. They used to use it back in the 50s and 40s, 30s, and going back in time. You don't really see it being used now. But it's basically like a paint, and when you touch it, it just leaves like white chalk on your fingers. That stuff causes plaster to fall off, you see, because you put your plaster on it and it doesn't, it's only stuck to dust and it comes off. So Ashley said, we always use blue grit if there's distemper. Never had a problem. Is this okay? So, when I was first getting to grips with plastering over lime wash paint and distemper, sometimes the ceiling would be fine, sometimes it wouldn't. And it sort of depends on how thick this lime wash chalky stuff is and how heavy the amount of plaster that you're sort of hanging off it is. So I'm not saying that you can't just PVA a ceiling over this lime wash paint and it's going to fall down. It might not, but it might do, Now, the thing with PVA is, and blue grit and SBR, by the way, my favourite stuff, it doesn't soak in to the distemper or the lime wash. It doesn't soak right into the stuff. It just dries like a skin on the top. So when you put your plaster on it, it still just pulls away because you've just got a skin of this, this sealer on top of a layer of dust. So when you add weight to it, it just pulls the dust away. Now, it might not, because if that lime wash paint or distemper isn't that thick, it might take the weight of it, or if they've added a bit more of, I don't know how they made it, but if it's more of a more solid sort of mix, because you rub some and they're not quite as dusty as others, then it might take the weight. But here's the fail safe. If you ever get to any of that stuff, just go and buy some stabilizing solution, keep it on the van. I mean, it feels thinner than water. It goes for miles and miles. You can buy one tub of it and it'll last you a year in the van, Just paint that on. It soaks into the stuff. And when it dries, you can rub it all you want and the dust is no more. It binds everything together. Stabilizing solution, screw fix, tool station, any painting shop. It stabilizes chalky backgrounds. That's what it's advertised for. Put that on, leave it dry, and then put your sealer over the top. You put your blue grit, your PVA, whatever concoction that you like to use, put that on top of it. But I'd definitely use the stabilizing solution first, because that way you're guaranteed. I don't want to go on. If it's under paint and you can't, the stabilizing solution won't soak through matte paint and get to it though. So you have to literally have this stuff exposed. If it's not exposed, then you have to overboard the ceiling if you want to guarantee that it's not going to fall down, So just, if you can scrape off and get down to it, then you get the gist of it. Let's carry on. Okay, last question is by Aidan Gallagher. Looks like Gallagher, but it's a CH, so I'm sure I'm pronouncing it right. Aidan Gallagher. Anyway, might sound like a silly question, mate. No such thing as a silly question, mate. There's no such thing as a silly question. If you don't know and you don't ask, then you're a silly person, aren't you? So if feel free to fire away. Anyone wants to know anything, I mean, flipping, just ask away. I bought a pre-broken in Marshalltown gold stainless steel trowel. Flipping heck, that's a good title, isn't it? Gold standard stainless steel. Flipping pre-broken in. Pre-broken in suggests to me I can skip this phase of breaking a trowel in. Thought to ask anyway. Cheers, mate. So, here's the thing with the pre-broken in Marshalltown trowels, right? I don't know who decided to tell people that they were pre-broken in. For me, I would say it's a flipping gimmick, because they're not pre-broken in. They've had the edge knocked off them slightly. But if you go and you're going to leave the same finish as a trowel, if you use that straight out the packet, it's going to leave you the similar finish to a trowel that's basically not pre-broken in, you know, just a standard trowel. All they've basically done is just started off the edge of the trowel. So when you get a trowel, the very edge of it's like a square, it's a sheet of metal, and all they've done is sort of like just hit that one side of the square edge of it, just chamfered it off. Yeah, they've started the process off, but really you're not going to be leaving a lovely job until your trowel is sharp, like you know, almost as sharp as it could cut you. Well, it would. If I slid my trowel across my hand, it would slice my hand like a knife. That's how sharp you want them. Now, I'm not saying you can't leave a nice job with a trowel that's not been broken in. I mean, that's how we break trowels in. If I snap the handle off my trowel tomorrow, I'd have to go and buy a brand new trowel, and that's all. You know, I'd have to use it. So, or get one of the other 30 that I've got in the van. But what I'm trying to say is, you have to break them in by using them. So you can use them brand new, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword for the beginner, because if you're struggling with plastering anyway because you're learning, and you've got a brand new trowel, you've sort of got two things going against you. So to answer your question before I start flipping going off topic, yeah, take your pre-warning trowel. They've started the process off. They're going to save you an hour doing this. Take it. Now, there's some people say rub them on a what's his name, stone that you use for your chisels and your knives. I find there's always a piece of concrete somewhere, you know, not the bumpy concrete, but, you know, the smooth sort of concrete floor inside a new build house if you're working on site, or a curbstone in the street, or a flagstone, or anything sort of just flat. Get your trowel, put the edge of it on it, and just rub it up and down, you know, give it 50 one side, 50 the other side, 50 the other side. The more time you can spend doing that, the faster it's going to wear in. But really, the only way to really break a trowel in is by using it. If you can get on sand and cement, you can get a massive job on sand and cement. That's when I try and use my trowels. You know, if I buy a new trowel, I'll get on a sand and cement job and use it as much as possible. I'm actually thinking, I've been toying with the idea. I don't know how the logistics of this would work, but I'm thinking a lot of people talking to me about trowels not broken in, and I'm thinking I actually don't mind breaking trowels, and I quite like using new trowels from time to time. So I'm thinking if there's a possible way where I could sort of buy trowels and break them in and sort of like, you know, just sell them back to you, like, you know, or something, you know, not for a profit for me, but just to sort of try and help a few beginners out. But I don't know if I sort of got over, I don't know how many I could do, you know. It takes a couple of months to sort of break a trowel in nice. So maybe that's a bit more of an answer for your question. It takes a little bit of a, you know, it takes a couple of months of daily use to get a trowel nice and sharp. But I'll possibly do that for people anyway. If it, you know, we'd have to work the logistics out, but that's potentially something we might look at in the future. The other thing as well, we had a lad work for us years ago, and we said to him to break this trowel in, you know, and he was learning, and he took it home. Flipping heck, I think he must have just been doing this on a piece of concrete, you know, for the whole weekend, because he'd come back. His trowel was smaller. He hadn't just broke it in. He was rounding because my dad said to him, I don't do this. I like my corners of my trowel. I like them perfect 90 degrees because I like to use them instead of a corner trowel, like. But my dad always used to knock the corners off the toe of his trowel, just sort of round them off a little bit. So my dad showed him, you know, just give the corner a little rub, you know, just so it rounds it off. Well, when he come back, his trowel was like a pool shape. He just wrecked it. He was useless. The whole top of it was almost rounded off. I think he'd just been at home like for the whole weekend, just on the grindstone. Oh, flipping. He was off his head, that lad. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want any embarrassment, but I remember he nearly made me pass out as well one day. We were on this job up in Wrexham, and what they started doing was, this is for Red Row homes. They stopped using timber studs internally. They used metal stud, and if you try to screw halfway up the wall to start your screwing off, like, the stud would kick out the way. So you always sort of start at the top or the bottom and work your way into the middle, so the stud doesn't move behind the plasterboard. Or you just grab hold of the stud, squeeze it to the board, and put your first screw in. Now, we use collated guns on new work. I don't use collated guns on old work because, trust me, just collated guns on new work, just use your old impact driver or your single screw on old work if you're overboarding, because it's just easier. But anyway, going back to what I was saying to you, he had hold of the stud and the plasterboard. Now, if you've ever seen metal stud, it's not a solid piece of metal. It's like the shape of a C, you know, it's hollow in the middle. So he grabbed it in the middle and was squeezing it to the plasterboard. He had his fingers inside the stud. The collated screw gun, I think it was 6,000 RPM, so it put screws in like bullets, right? And he went, boom, straight in. The drywall screw went through the plasterboard, through the stud, in one side of his finger and out of his flipping fingernail at the other side. And he's like trying to pull off the wall, and his hand is screwed to the flipping wall. Oh my God, I can't, I'm not really keen on this. You know, I don't mind a bloody nose or, you know, a cut lip, but that when there's all white, oh, flipping no way, mate. And we didn't have little screw guns. We only had screwdrivers for taking out the missed screws. My brother's gone over to him to unscrew it. And because everyone's panicking, my little brother is tightening the screw up on his fingers. Oh, man. Makes me feel queasy just thinking about it. Oh, flipping heck. Right, that's it anyway. That's the questions I wanted to answer done. If you have any more questions, feel free to put them in the comments of this video and I'll answer them next week. I mean, I won't leave you waiting for a week as well. If I can get round to answering your questions in the meantime, I will just type you a reply. But if you don't mind, I mean, I'll just sort of save your questions so I can answer them in another little episode of this, questions from the comments. Guys, listen, I hope you've enjoyed that. If you appreciate the video and you think, you know, you've learned something and you want to show your appreciation and buy me a pint, then there's a link in the description. When I first set this up, you could sort of like, you know, they were sort of asking you for a load of dough. And I set it to the minimum, like three quid, so it's not expensive anyway. If you fancy, you don't, no obligation. I'm just saying, you know. Cheers. Anyway, I won't waffle. Have a good Sunday. Take it easy.